So I want to start today by taking you back to a very specific moment. It's the mid-1970s.
Okay.
Picture a 13-year-old kid. He's just had his bar mitzvah, and he's got, a decent little pile of gift money.
Right. I remember that feeling.
Most kids in 1975, they're probably out buying comic books, maybe saving for a bike.
Or a stereo system if they were really ambitious.
Exactly. But this kid is Peter Schiff, the economist whose work we're digging into today. And instead of buying any of that, he goes out and buys gold.
Which is just, it's such a funny image, right? A teenager hedging against inflation.
Oh, it gets so much better. He buys in at around $35 an ounce, which was basically the store at the time.
Wow.
He holds it all through high school, through all that crazy 70s inflation, and then he sells it right around 1980, near the absolute peak.
Which was what, $800 an ounce? Something like that?
About $850. And he takes all that cash and he buys his senior year car, an MGB convertible.
I think I remember this part of the story. He didn't even know how to drive it, did he?
He didn't. It was a stick shift. He just bought it and figured, I'll learn later.
Classic.
But here's the hook. This is what sets up our entire conversation. Schiff looks back on that trade, not as some brilliant investment, but as a lesson in what he calls the illusion of wealth. He got the car, sure. But his argument is that the gold didn't really get that much more valuable.
The dollar just collapsed.
The dollar just collapsed.
Yeah.
And that distinction, that is the key to his entire worldview.
It really is. We tend to look at a price tag going up and we think, wow, look at that asset booming.
Right.
Schiff looks at that same price and says, no, your money is dying.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We've gone through a stack of Schiff's work articles, interviews, transcripts, and the core argument is that almost every economic number we rely on,
from the stock market to inflation to unemployment,
it's all a mirage. It's all because we're using a broken measuring stick.
So we're going to get into why the government might be, let's say, creatively accounting for inflation. We'll talk about why your health insurance might be the very reason healthcare is so expensive.
And the really controversial part, why Schiff thinks Bitcoin is absolutely not the lifeboat people think it is.
Definitely not.
So let's start with that idea of the melting ruler. Because, I look at the Dow Jones.
Sure.
The chart goes up and to the right. It went from 10,000 back in 2000 to, nearly 50,000 recently. I look at my 401k and I feel richer. Is he saying that's all a lie?
It's not a lie, but he'd say it's a nominal truth, you have more dollars. But what Schiff challenges you to do is change the denominator.
Meaning?
Stop pricing the stock market in dollars, which can be printed into oblivion. Start pricing it in something real. In his case, gold.
Okay, so if I actually do that math, the value of the Dow divided by the price of gold, what does that chart look like?
It completely flips on its head. Back in 2000 or 2001, it took about 45 ounces of gold to buy one share, let's say, of the Dow.
45 ounces.
Okay. Today, it takes roughly somewhere between 13 and 16 ounces.
Wait, hold on a second. You're telling me I can buy the entire stock market with less gold today than I could 20 years ago?
Significantly less than half.
That is wild. That implies the companies haven't actually created any real value.
That's his point. Exactly. It suggests we haven't seen a bull market in value. We've seen a bear market in currency. The stocks aren't worth more. The dollars you use to buy them are just worth less.
So it's like measuring your height with a ruler that shrinks every year.
You'd think you were growing into a giant, but you're actually the same size. The ruler's just melting in your hand.
This brings up a really fundamental definition that I think we've lost. Schiff makes a very hard distinction between money and currency. I've always just used them as synonyms.
And most people do. But in his view, they are completely different things. He argues that real money has to be a store of value. It has to preserve your purchasing power.
Like gold or silver.
Right. Currency, on the other hand, is just a medium of exchange. It's a receipt. It's just paper.
So the dollar used to be a claim check for actual money.
Exactly. Until 1971. That's the big moment, the Nixon shock. That's when the U.S. completely severed the final link between the dollar and gold.
And after that, it was just... trust us.
Pure fiat currency. It's backed by nothing but faith and the government's promise. And Schiff's argument is, once you cut that tether, the government can print as much currency as it wants.
Which destroys the money aspect of it.
It annihilates it. And why did they do it? He points to the Vietnam War and the war on poverty. If they had to raise taxes to pay for those, the public would have revolted.
But if you just print the money...
It's a hidden tax. It's a stealth tax. You steal the value from everyone's savings without ever having to send them a bill.
This leads right into inflation. We hear that word on the news and we're told it means rising prices. But Schiff gets really, really passionate about this definition.
He says we've been completely gaslit. He literally pulls out old Webster's dictionaries from like the 50s and 60s to prove his point.
And what did it say back then?
Back then, inflation was defined as the expansion of the money supply. It was the cause, not the effect. Rising prices were just the consequence of that inflation.
Why does that semantic shift even matter? I mean, isn't he just being pedantic?
No, because it's all about accountability.
Huh.
If inflation is defined as printing money, well, there's only one group you can blame for that.
The government, the Federal Reserve.
Right, they're the only ones with the printing press. But if you redefine inflation as rising prices,
Then you can blame anybody.
suddenly it's the greedy butcher, it's the oil companies, it's Vladimir Putin, it's the supply chain. It allows the arsonist to show up and blame the fire.
And he claims they don't just play word games, they play math games.
Yeah.
With the CPI, the Consumer Price Index.
Oh, yeah.
I've always felt like that basket of goods they measured doesn't really reflect my own costs.
Well, Schiff did this fascinating little experiment. The government data said that over a certain 10-year period, the price of newspapers and magazines went up by about 30%.
Okay, seems plausible.
He thought it sounded low, so he didn't trust the spreadsheet. He went out and physically found old magazines from 10 years prior.
Which have the price printed right on the cover. You can't fake that.
You cannot fake that. And when he compared them to the current issues, the price hadn't gone up 30%.
How much was it?
It was up 130%.
Wow, that's not a rounding error. That's a massive difference.
It's huge. And you have to think about the motive.
Hmm.
Social security payments, government pensions, tax brackets, all of it is tied to that CPI number.
So if they can underreport inflation.
They save billions of dollars. They're basically balancing the budget by shortchanging your grandmother.
That's a grim way to put it. He doesn't stop at inflation, though. He goes after the unemployment numbers, too. And here's where I have to push back a little. His claim is that if we measured unemployment today the way we did in the 70s, the rate would be over 10%.
That's his number, yeah.
But 10% is catastrophic. That's almost Great Depression territory. If that were actually true, wouldn't we feel it? Wouldn't we see breadlines?
He argues that a lot of people do feel it, but the data is designed to hide it. The big trick is how they define who is in the labor force.
Okay.
In the past, if you were a discouraged worker, you looked for a job for so long you just gave up, you were still counted as unemployed.
And today?
Today, you just vanish. You're no longer in the statistic. You don't exist in the calculation.
So the labor force just shrinks on paper, which makes the percentage look better.
Exactly. And then there's the quality of the jobs. If you want a full-time 40-hour-a-week job, but all you can find is 1 hour a week walking dogs, the government marks you down as employed.
You're a success story.
You're a success story in the data. So we've replaced, high-paying factory jobs with DoorDash gigs, and the headline number treats them as if they're the same thing.
Okay, so the measuring stick is broken for inflation, it's broken for unemployment. But let's talk about the why. Why is the Fed so obsessed with having inflation? They have a 2% target. They act like deflation. Prices going down is the worst thing imaginable.
Well, the textbook reason they give you is that if prices are falling, nobody will buy anything.
The logic being, why buy a car today if it'll be cheaper next year?
Right. Everyone waits, the economy grinds to a halt, and we all starve.
Yeah, I guess it makes some kind of theoretical sense.
But does it actually happen in the real world? Schiff always points to the tech sector.
Good point.
Computers, TVs, cell phones, they get better and cheaper every single year. Deflation is the norm in tech. Does anyone ever say, I'm not going to buy this iPhone because the iPhone 20 will be cheaper?
No, of course not. They line up for blocks.
Exactly. People buy things when they need or want them. You don't starve yourself for a year because a loaf of bread might be 2% cheaper next fall. So he says that whole consumer behavior argument is just a smokescreen.
So what's the real reason? Why do they need inflation?
It's the debt. The U.S. government is the single largest debtor in the history of the world. And if we had deflation, if the dollar actually got stronger over time, the real value of that debt would go up. It would become impossible to ever pay back.
So inflation is a way to default on your debt without ever officially defaulting.
It's a stealth default. Bingo.
Mm-hmm.
If you owe $30 trillion and you can inflate the currency so much that $30 trillion only buys you a sandwich, well, paying back your debt becomes pretty easy.
They're not protecting us, they're protecting themselves.
They need inflation to service the debt. They're protecting the government's solvency and not your purchasing power.
Okay, let's pivot to how this kind of government interference messes with our daily lives. Schiff has this theory that whenever the government steps in to make something affordable, it immediately becomes wildly expensive.
He calls it the paradox of intervention, and his two favorite examples are college tuition and healthcare.
The college one really hits home. I mean, we all hear stories about how cheap school used to be. Schiff's own father paid his tuition with a summer job.
Which sounds like a fairy tale to a student today who's looking at $250,000 in debt.
So what changed?
Schiff argues the problem started the moment the government began guaranteeing student loans.
Guaranteed is the key word there.
It's everything. Before that, a bank would only lend you money for college if they thought you were a good bet. They'd look at your major, your grades.
If you could actually pay it back.
Right. But once the government stepped in and said, hey, banks, don't worry, if the kid defaults, we'll cover the loss, the banks just opened the floodgates.
And the colleges looked at that and said, it's a free-for-all.
It became an infinite money glitch. The universities realized the students weren't price-sensitive anymore. They were playing with house money. So they jacked up tuition to build fancy dorms and lazy rivers and hire armies of administrators.
The subsidy didn't make college cheaper. It just allowed colleges to charge more.
Exactly. And he applies that same logic to healthcare, using this analogy that I thought was just brilliant. He compares health insurance to auto insurance.
Right. Walk us through that.
Imagine if your car insurance worked like your health insurance. It wouldn't just cover a huge crash. It would also cover your gasoline, your oil changes, your new tires.
I wouldn't even look at the price of gas. I'd just pull up and say, fill her up. Geico's paying.
And the gas station would start charging $100 a gallon. Why wouldn't they? The customer doesn't care about the price. That, he says, is the U.S. healthcare system.
It's not insurance anymore. It's a prepaid consumption plan.
Precisely. Because a third party is paying the bill, nobody, not the doctor, not the patient, has any incentive to care about the cost, so prices just go to the moon.
And he points out, the one area of medicine that is mostly a free market
LASIK eye surgery.
has actually gotten better and cheaper over time, just like a laptop.
Because insurance doesn't usually cover it. Doctors have to compete for your actual cash. It proves the market works when you let it.
Okay, so we've painted this picture of a crumbling dollar, a manipulated economy. Now, usually when someone lays out this thesis, the punchline is,
Buy Bitcoin.
buy Bitcoin. It's the digital gold, the answer to fiat currency. But Schiff, he is famously, maybe infamously, not on board.
He is the ultimate crypto skeptic. He's standing on the tracks, yelling at the oncoming train.
But I have to play devil's advocate. I mean, Bitcoin is portable, it's divisible, it's scarce. The government can't just print more of it. Isn't that everything he says he wants in money?
He'll concede all of those properties. But he argues it fails the single most important test, intrinsic value.
And he has an analogy for that too, right? The shipwreck.
The shipwreck analogy. He says, imagine a Spanish galleon sinks in the 1600s with a chest full of gold bars. You dive down 500 years later and recover it. That gold is still immensely valuable. You can melt it down, use it in dentistry and electronics, make jewelry. It has a physical use case.
It have value outside of just being money.
Right. Now, imagine a ship sinks with a hard drive containing the private keys to $1 billion of Bitcoin.
And 500 years later.
It's a rusted piece of junk. It's a useless string of numbers. His point is that gold has value in and of itself. Bitcoin's value is entirely dependent on someone else being willing to buy it from you for more.
The greater fool theory.
That's all he thinks it is. People aren't buying Bitcoin to use it as a currency. They're buying it to speculate, to sell it to someone else down the line. It doesn't produce anything.
Unlike a stock that pays a dividend or a property that generates rent.
Exactly. To him, it's just digital tulips.
What about the privacy argument? Because early on, that was the big sell. It's anonymous digital cash.
He argues that ship has completely sailed. With all the ETF approvals and the strict KYC Know Your Customer laws, Bitcoin is now fully integrated into the surveillance state.
You can't really move it around anonymously anymore?
Not in any significant amount. The government is watching. And he makes one final point that's pretty compelling.
Which is?
Look at what the central banks are doing. The really sophisticated players. They are dumping U.S. dollars like crazy to diversify their reserves.
But they're not buying Bitcoin.
They are buying gold by the ton. He argues If the people who actually run the global monetary system are all retreating to gold, you should probably pay attention.
Okay, so let's say I'm convinced. I'm worried of the dollar. I don't trust Bitcoin. I want to buy some gold.
Hmm.
Schiff actually has a warning here, too. He talks about gold scams.
Yeah, which sounds a little weird coming from the biggest gold bug out there, but it's actually really practical advice.
He's calling out his own industry.
He's calling out the bad actors in his industry, the ones who often advertise on, say, conservative talk radio. They bait you in with the fear of inflation and then switch you into really bad products.
What makes a gold product bad? I mean, isn't gold just gold?
You'd think so. But what they do is they push numismatic or collectible coins. They'll tell you this whole story. Oh, don't buy regular bullion. The government confiscated that in the 30s. You need to buy this rare pre-1933 coin.
And I'm guessing that rare coin comes with a pretty hefty markup.
A massive markup. Sometimes they'll charge you double the actual value of the gold in the coin. And that huge margin is what pays for the expensive celebrity endorsements and the radio ads.
So what's his rule of thumb?
It's simple. If a dealer is offering you free gold or guaranteed price protection or promising to buy it back at the same price you paid, just run away.
Just buy the boring bar or the standard coin.
Buy the bullion. Keep it boring. He says if you're paying for a story that's attached to the coin, you're almost certainly getting ripped off.
Now, for all his hate of Bitcoin, he's not a complete Luddite. He actually talks about something called tokenized gold.
This is where he tries to bridge that gap. He admits the technology, the blockchain, is brilliant for moving value around instantly. He just thinks the asset on that chain should be real.
So you're putting gold on the blockchain.
Essentially, yes. You would hold a digital token that represents a direct legal title to a specific audited bar of physical gold sitting in a vault somewhere.
And you could send that token to someone.
You could zap that token to someone in Australia in 2 seconds to pay for something. It gives you the speed and efficiency of crypto, but it's backed by the stability and intrinsic value of physical gold.
That actually makes a ton of sense. It solves the whole, how do I carry my gold bars around problem.
Right. It's modernizing the gold standard, not trying to replace it with a digital abstraction.
So let's wrap this all up. We've gone from a teenager's MGB to global debt crises. What is the big overarching takeaway here? What's the future that Schiff sees coming?
He believes we are heading inevitably toward a sovereign debt crisis, a moment when the rest of the world stops accepting our paper dollars for their real goods and services.
A moment when the check bounces.
The check finally bounces. And when that steady flow of cheap stuff from overseas stops,
The inflation that we've been exporting for decades all comes rushing back home.
and prices here skyrocket, not because of corporate greed, but because the dollar finally loses its exorbitant privilege.
It's a pretty sobering thought. It really forces you to ask the question, am I actually building wealth, or am I just collecting pieces of paper that are slowly but surely turning into confetti?
And maybe more importantly, are you measuring your success with a ruler that is melting in your hands? That's really the question to sleep on.
A heavy thought, but a necessary one. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
My pleasure.